So let's bring you through the newspaper headlines.
Yeah, we'll start with the Irish Times and Jamie Heaslip dominating a lot of the back pages today. The Irish Times saying that the gifted Heaslip may have been the greatest ever Ireland number 8. That's Jerry Thornley's article there, saying durable athlete, was Mr. Indestructible and scaled so many heights during a glorious career. He lists off all the career highlights there. Some brilliant images across the back pages this morning of Jamie Heaslip. This one seems to be the one doing the rounds, mostly him with the tricolour around his neck after the All Blacks game, of course. Injury forces Heaslip to bow out after a glittering career. While on the back of the Irish Daily Mail, there's also that image there again. Farewell to a true great, reads the headline in block caps. Cullen leads tributes as Heaslip calls time. Meanwhile, on the back of the Irish Independent this morning, or in the Irish Examiner, I should say, they're going with Heaslip, or sorry, a different story entirely there. They've got a Mike Quirk column at the top about weekend tragedies, putting sport and life into perspective, and then it's a different rugby story leading the way. It's Leah Lyons confronting the terrace cowards. It's pretty grim reading, that story inside in the Irish Examiner about some of the names she was called at the weekend. She was speaking at an awards night. And basically just outlines some of the slurs directed to her from the stands, and basically her family within earshot. And thankfully there was enough people in the stands to just turn around to these idiots and say shut up. And she's spoken out about this. It's a very good read. It's something that I suppose we don't hear about an awful lot. But
no, fair play to her as well. Obviously we don't in any way advocate violence. We'll make an exception for this one instance where she says somebody gave him a good flake of a flag, which sounds like, yeah, fair play. That is probably the only way to deal with these things, not to advocate violence.
Yeah. It's an interesting one in the back pages in terms of the Leah Lyons story. It's not just Heaslip. And you've also got this other story, Sean O'Brien blow for slam chance. Ireland flanker struggling to be fit before the end of the Six Nations. So, yeah, there's plenty happening on the rugby agenda this morning.
I mean, sometimes I feel like we should just do the front page headlines on days like today. Beast from the Yeast is the lack of the stories, and then the other papers are going, oh wow, look, where's that snow? It's from like 2010, and oh Jesus, where's that snow? That's from like 1982. And then bread alert. I mean, come on, bread alert. That's not bad, is it?
I couldn't quite calculate last night whether or not the pictures from 1982 were just where the quality was so crap that it made it look a lot worse than it really was, or was this actually one of the worst blizzards the country's ever seen?
Oh no, it was like proper
what was it like?
Snow drifting in the back garden. I was 5, so like my memory of it is kind of golden. Like we had about a week off school. You got up, you went out and you played in the snow. You came in when you got too cold, you warmed up and you went back out again. It was great, and because there was no as far as I remember, there was no wind, so it didn't feel freezing. Like obviously the snow was cold, but
I wonder, is that where the phrase, you know, the long cold winter in Kerry comes from? You know, it was 1982, Seamus Darby had just put the ball in the back of the net, and it was a long cold winter that year, and it's just been kept on every year. Kerry have a bitter loss in the championship.
Which, you know, is almost never. Harry must go. This is AVB. Hurling from the ditch. Shut up, AVB, I think would be the general consensus from most Spurs fans. But Levy says no. Spurs chief vows only Poch decides who leaves. Well, Poch and the agent of the player who wants to get paid is going to decide exactly what the story is there. No real consensus from most of the papers. Second site, runner-up spot is bare minimum requirement for Manchester United, says Smalling. Chris Smalling says that they're interested in finishing second in the league because, who cares? If you don't win, you don't win. Bren Gunn, Celtic's Rodgers on shortlist to become the new Arsenal manager as Wenger faces up to summer exit. Is he? I mean, it's not ridiculous. Like, finished second, would have won the league only for Steven Gerrard's slip. Yeah.
It isn't ridiculous. It's not
He's
great.
He's done a really good job with Celtic.
He's done a very good job, yeah. It isn't ridiculous.
Season. Plays good football.
What more can you ask from him? For sure. Like, his stock is certainly back to where it
You're
might have
squirming
been.
As an Arsenal fan. I can see you squirming.
A small bit. There is something about that season where he gets sacked that has ruined his stock, and it shouldn't have done, because everything he's done on a successful level, aka almost winning the Premier League and the unbeaten season with Celtic, should completely outweigh that, but it hasn't. He's tired because of what happened in that Dara season post Suarez.
Claudio Ranieri won the league as well, I suppose, you know.
It's true.
Even mediocre managers.
But like he's been put in the same bread as Carlo Ancelotti, as you see there. Come on, who are you going to choose?
So gun for hire. Carlo Ancelotti is ready to step in at Arsenal if Arsene Wenger is axed. You know that whole, I never speak about another manager. Luckily, I've got an agent who you can give a quick call to there, and he'll tell you that I'd be very interested in taking that job, but that'll be off the record, of course.
Yeah, just Ancelotti sitting at home is like, oh no, my agent's at it again. He's going to go get me a very, very nice job. Carlo Ancelotti, though, I'm not sure does he want that job for nothing other than the fact that it might be a long-term project. Does Carlo Ancelotti really want that? It certainly seems to me that Ancelotti likes to go into a club for a little while, get out of there after a little while, get a good contract for a year or so and go back to the beach.
Swans at liberty to see off Wednesday. Premier League outfit should be too strong in FA Cup replay. This is Swansea against Sheffield Wednesday on tonight. And then best from the West. I never really feel like we're from the West. But as a country we are, obviously. So that's the point about the Racing Post is the beast from the East is on its way, but so too is the best from the West. After Willie Mullins rated Duvan's chances of making Cheltenham and a sumptuous showdown with Altior as considerably better than 50-50.
Some of the UK back pages, the back of The Guardian says Guardiola faces touchline ban. FA ready to punish Manchester City manager for ribbon stance like Jamie Jackson and Simon Burnton reporting there. While on the front of the Tele Telegraph sports section, it is show us your medals. Heroes return following Britain's best ever performance at the Winter Olympics. Heroes indeed. Well done, Britain, on your achievement of, I suppose, a ratio of about £1.5 million per medal, per competitor even. You know, fair play to all 20 people who are funded by, winter sports in the UK. You've done very well and you've represented your country beautifully.
Yeah, I mean, they did decide that they wanted to win medals and then they went and bought the medals, which is how it works. So,
yes.
I don't think we as a country should do it.
No.
But if Britain, with their, sitting on the piles of cash that they plundered from empires and stolen fortunes from around the world, if they choose to spend that winning medals in the skeleton, then who are we, or the curling, who are we to scoff at, the use of their massive amounts of resources?
Well, their massive amount of resources have a 0% influence on, or 0% funding for a sport like basketball, which could have a huge participation rate and that everybody could get involved with, because funnily enough, Ger, it's actually a lot cheaper to install a basketball hoop in a hall than it is to build a tube or whatever you go down a skeleton on, or a half pipe, or you fly your team over to the Alps.
Do they have a half pipe in England somewhere?
There's something in Southampton. That's your man, Billy Morgan, not that Billy Morgan, the UK Billy Morgan, who won bronze in Big Air. Is the name of the sport. It's the first time in the Olympics. So apparently he can practice in Southampton. And did I have something in Manchester as well? Maybe something, whatever their version of Kiltiernan is basically. But UK sport isn't funding, as I say, a sport like basketball, which could have huge participation levels. And they're pumping in 5 to 10 million on winter sports.
Yeah, I know, it's ridiculous. It's completely ridiculous. Interesting piece from Richard Williams today in The Guardian. How does Guardiola feel about being an ambassador for Qatar's World Cup? It was 10 years ago. I didn't realise it was a full 10 years ago that Pep Guardiola took a couple of million to be an ambassador for Qatar's World Cup bid. And obviously Guardiola came out and explained that I am a human first, I'm a football manager second. And so obviously I look at what's happening in Catalonia and have decided that I'm going to stand up for the people of whom I am one, and say that this is wrong, and that's why I'm wearing this yellow ribbon. All he's doing is wearing a yellow ribbon at the moment, and highlighting that cause and bringing that cause to an audience of millions and millions and millions and millions of people globally in a way that almost nobody else can do. And so there's been a view that his work on the question of Catalonian independence is completely scuppered by the fact that he took money from Qatar to be an ambassador for their World Cup bid, given what we now know about Qatar's World Cup bid and the flagrant abuse of human rights in the building of stadiums. The basically indentured slaves have been working on those. People have died. There has been no duty of care to the people building those. And Qatar and FIFA have gone, well, want to make an omelette, got to break some eggs. And I mean, maybe he is just a hypocrite, and you can't do the Qatar thing and then therefore be in any way credible about what's happening in Catalonia. But he might also be right about the fact that what's happening in Catalonia is complete bullshit, and somebody needs to put their hand up and do that. And so he's doing that while also having taken the money, which was wrong. it's possible that he was wrong then and right now. That's like a relatively straightforward thing.
Yeah, like that's a fair point. Is it worse to be a hypocrite than it is to turn your back on Catalonia, or would you rather him be consistent and turn his back on both causes?
Or maybe he made a mistake, took the money because it was so much money and should have done more, and has learned the lesson of his way. Who knows, right? But Richard Williams has a brilliant introduction when he talks about the FA, and you know, historically, they don't really have much of a leg to stand on when it comes to criticising people, because in 1938, of course, the English football team did the Nazi salute in Berlin ahead of a match against Germany, and there was a big row. The players didn't want to do it, but ultimately the British ambassador to Berlin said, I have to do it, so you have to do it. And Stanley Rouse, who seems like an absolute scumbag, ends up forcing the players to do it as well, but later on becomes like a fairly renowned racist head of FIFA. And so not a good guy, and this is like a really black stain on the English FA and generally, and it's a really good piece. But then at the end, Richard Williams' piece goes, someone could also point out to Guardiola that 10 years ago he was acting as a paid ambassador for Qatar's World Cup. How does he feel about that now, following revelations about the Gulf states' use of its labour laws to restrict the rights of immigrant labourers, building its new stadiums, and the apparent indifference to dozens of deaths on the project? In the eye of history, his readiness to front for the Qataris might look barely more defensible than the FA's capitulation in Berlin.
Strong words.
I mean, is it really like? Seems like there's a lot of people on the internet finish debates with, it's worse than Hitler, man.
Yeah. Okay.
There's a bit of Godwin's law going on there, from my liking.
Yeah, to a certain extent, but there is also the element of hindsight when it comes to the mood music around Europe in 1938, as in, obviously, if they'd made that decision at the far end of the war, it's like, what the hell are you doing? It's a completely different level. Of course we have the difference of hindsight, but we also have the difference of hindsight here. And, like, did Guardiola know the horrors that were to occur, or that might have already been occurring at the time of the bid? I would be very surprised if he didn't, or a smart man like him didn't even ask questions. Like, this isn't a new thing that suddenly Qatar gained the World Cup rights and suddenly started indulging in human rights abuses. This was occurring before, not on the scale, and certainly not as invasive in the world of football as it is now. But surely Pep Guardiola, as I say, a smart man like him, should have asked questions.
It was a chronic decision by him. It was a chronic decision by Xavi to go out there and front for that as well. Like,
the Xavi one is very strange, actually, given some of the stuff. Xavi seems like an incredibly thoughtful person.
But so does Guardiola. And so, like, I just think that I just don't think that, like, Nazi Germany and that English football team really is the right conversation to be having about what's happening here. I mean, maybe I'm completely wrong about that. Maybe we all need to look at these things in that historical context. But it seems like it's a bit of a stretch to go. Him being an ambassador for that is the same. I mean, maybe it is. Maybe that's what we need. How we need to think about these things. But it just seems that, like, comparing everything to, like, you're effectively bringing up the Holocaust when you're talking about what happens from 1938 on, and maybe we can have conversations today about stuff without automatically referring back to the Holocaust.
Maybe, but that's my hindsight argument. I mean, like, you would like to have thought that there were smart enough people in the FA in the 1930s to know about.
The players didn't want to do it.
So the player, but it was the FA top brass who were like,
and the ambassador.
Yeah, like, this is a good political move from our point of view. Like, I know this is kind of going against my previous argument, but to say in 1938 that there was absolutely no sign of anti-Semitism in Nazi Germany is completely ridiculous.
Yeah.
That's completely false.
Yeah.
So there were those signs, and it was clearly viewed as a political move that they saw this thing as a negative trait, rather than the thing that would end up defining this whole regime that is essentially the biggest atrocity in the history of humankind. And the FA didn't see the signs of it. They were like, this is fine, this is only kind of a sidebar. And that is the way Qatar is viewed. Whereas it's like, this is only a side thing that's going on. And ultimately, did Guardiola look at the men involved in this bid and were like, these men seem to be decent men? Yeah,
you hope he doesn't. You hope that's not what happened, that it's just a complete oversight and greed got in the way. And so, like, there's not to excuse it, but that it's not like actually, I think that's fine. Because in that case, then, like, it's even worse. It's really bad either way.
Yeah.
But it doesn't necessarily mean that we shouldn't also then be able to talk about the situation in Catalonia. Like, and Guardiola being, it's complicated, by his previous stance, but it's not. I don't think that it fully. Human beings are complicated. They make a lot of mistakes and they make bad decisions and they say rubbish from time to time. And then when somebody says something that is meaningful, that doesn't mean we should automatically turn our backs on what's meaningful because of what's been said.
It's what he does next is the interesting thing. That is probably the real judge of his character.
He's going to keep wearing his yellow ribbon, I think.
Well, not in terms of the yellow ribbon, but in terms of his stance on Qatar. What is his next? Is he going to speak about this, put his real opinion on the line and say, I regret the initial support? Still going to keep working for Manchester City, despite the fact what the owners are alleged to have done and their kind of links to atrocities that are on that par as well. And maybe he'll come out and speak about that, and maybe he'll give an acceptable excuse. But it's hard to see how he backs his way out of this one once he acknowledges the hypocrisy, to be honest. Because
well, you just ignore it and keep going. I'm talking about this one thing, and
that's the likely scenario, isn't it?
Yeah, that would. Yeah, it is, because what does he gain by suddenly trying to become a spokesperson on something where he's obviously clearly been bought?
Absolutely F all, Jared. Absolutely nothing. And he's not going to, it will be an ideal situation where he did that, but he's not going to.